What's going on, everybody? All right, this is Lady Luck Club here again, and I just had to do this video. So, earlier I did a live stream and we checked out the Candace Owens video that she did a day ago. Um, and she brought up something regarding Turning Point's tax filings, and more so listening to a content creator speak about what they have as an endowment. So, first thing I want to do is I want to get to that part of the video where she plays this video from a content creator that goes over the tax forms, speaks about the endowment, and then we're going to look at some information that I just did some, Google searches on, pulled up the tax statement for that endowment in particular, and just general information about an endowment, the various types, and the restrictions regarding how endowments are spent and how they are maintained. So before we get to that, make sure you guys hit the like button. And if you're enjoying the great content here coming out of the Lady Luck Club, please subscribe. I do believe in presenting factual information and doing research. If it's something that, you're not familiar with, or you're not, you know, have a full understanding of, we have information at our fingertips. We can just Google. So that's what I did. And so all the information, the links from my searches, I will have in the description of the video, because I believe in sharing the resources that any and everyone else in, the general public can pull up and look at for themselves. Reading is fundamental. So hit that like button, leave your thoughts and comments below. And as always, this is not something I'm an expert in regarding endowments and specific investment accounts or investment funds. So if you have a lot more knowledge about it, feel free to share your knowledge in the comments, and I will pin you guys' comments up so that people can see the information and we can all learn together, because that's what it's all about. All right, so first things first. Oh Lord, let's get to Candace. Because reasons this is somehow an issue for her, and I don't know why. All right, let's go.
I have no doubt that Tucker Carlson and I are being threatened. That's pretty obvious. I think it's very obvious that nobody thinks Egypt is behind it. The last time that narrative ran was probably the USS Liberty. That was the plan, right? To make us think Egypt had attacked us, but it wasn't actually Egypt that attacked that ship. It was Israel. Israel attacked that ship. Israel is growing increasingly.
Let me fast forward.
Financial statements.
Hold on.
Which I'm going to show. Now, this wasn't the people that I was working with, and there is somebody else that I told you that I'm going to have on my show that has been looking into this for a while. But this was extremely well done and at least brought forth some big questions that I think are on a lot of people's minds. How does an organization that size just miss not just they filed for an extension and then miss the extension deadline to file? Let's take a listen to a part of what they had to say.
Let's go look at the 990 forms that Turning Point USA submits to the IRS every year. These contain their annual financial statements. When you look at the forms, there are some very strange anomalies. Several of the 990 forms are missing. Turning Point USA lists 4 related entities. There's Turning Point USA, Turning Point Endowment, Turning Point Action, and America's Turning Point. All different organizations do slightly different things. The Form 990 for fiscal year 2024 is posted for Turning Point USA, but it is missing for all the other 3 organizations. It looks like it was never turned in. This is a massive red flag. So Tyler Boyer is being snarky on X.com and telling people to go look at the annual financial audit, but the financial audit is missing from last year for 3 of the 4 organizations. This strange decision to hide their financial statements happened 4 months before Charlie Kirk was murdered. I will repeat for clarity. Someone at Turning Point decided not to file 3 of the 4 of their annual financial statements 4 months before Charlie Kirk appointed a new COO.
That's not true. They have the right to request an extension. I'll go over that information, but it's not a matter of someone deciding not to do it. They were granted an extension. And then lest we not forget, the CEO was shot and killed in front of thousands of people on national television. So that's not a matter of them deciding not to do it. Because if they've done it before for the other previous years, it's not going to be any different. There just so happened to be a full event change within the organization with them losing their CEO. Can we not lose our humanity and think and assume they just decided to not file when they've had no problem filing previously? So we'll go over that information, but we'll let this guy finish.
Requested a new audit and was murdered. Those 3 financial statements are still missing.
So to be clear, that was another point that they gaslit me on when I told you that it was unusual that 7 days before Charlie died, he said that he wanted to establish Doge, right? Tyler came out and lied, and he said, this is just totally regular. And Alex Clark said, oh, every year since I've been here, this is what we do. And the guy starts this video by being like, you have to be an idiot to accept that as an answer. Of course, doing an audit has nothing to do with internally establishing a Doge, right? He recognized that something's wrong at the organization. And as I told you, okay, because I do not miss on these things, he was not just concerned about where the money was going.
The content creator that was speaking did not speak of the Doge. He stated that it was a red flag because the 3 subsidiaries, the 3 sub companies that fall under Turning Point USA, has not had the financial statements and those related tax documents filed yet. We'll go over that information regarding the extension.
He was concerned about where it was coming from. And what I can tell you about Charlie is that if Charlie got clued into something, if Charlie was at first trusting his lieutenant and then he suddenly said, wait a second, what's going on over here? And he decided that he wanted to figure something out, he would have figured that ish out by sundown. Okay. That is how brilliant he was. If it had his attention, he would have figured it out by sundown. What did Charlie discover is my question. Okay. Now, to correct something that he says there, he says 4 months before, that's the regular tax deadline. It is actually normal. It is for big companies to file for a tax extension, but they missed that deadline as well. I think that was October 15th was a tax extension deadline. They have missed them both, and that is completely abnormal. And he is correct. If you go back and you look at Turning Point USA's filings before, they always file all of them at the same time. So this is unusual that they've left off 3 of them. And I'm going to let him get into a deeper clip here where he discusses the quote.
So for the Turning Point endowment, the Turning Point endowment, the type of endowment that it is established by the board. And Charlie Kirk, of course, was the president of that board. So considering the fact that he was assassinated, it would cause a delay on the decisions that are to be made, how the money is spent and managed, because now you've lost the president of your board that created the endowment and that is able to regulate with reasonable restrictions on how the money is utilized, spent, managed, and the profits of the money, meaning it's like an investment. You get the return on investment, which is the profits that you generate, and that is what you use to spend back into the organization, while the principal amount, the amount you put into the endowment, sits there, because that's the purpose of it. It's sitting there to help generate a return on investment. And that ROI is what's used to go back to Turning Point USA to take care of expenses and projects. And we'll see that in the most last recent tax filing that they did submit for Turning Point endowment. So if the Turning Point endowment is created by the board and regulated by the board, and the president of the board is shot and killed, then yes, you're going to have to put those people back in place just so that those decisions can be made. And they don't have a problem getting a tax attorney and working with the IRS for an extension. We'll get to that in a minute.
Unquote, missing 8.6 million. Take a listen.
Let us look at the one financial statement we do have for fiscal year 2024 for Turning Point USA. Schedule I shows grants and other assistance to organizations, governments, and individuals in the United States. This schedule shows you where Turning Point is sending its money. We see that a lot of money, $8,560,625, is being sent to America's Turning Point. They are sending it to their own shell company. Now, this is not necessarily illegal, except for the fact that the...
Pause. It's not illegal. It's not illegal. And the documents to be filed, you see, are 3 remaining: Turning Point Endowment, Turning Point Action, America's Turning Point. These 3 are like subsidiaries. They're like the babies of the parent company. This is a 501c3. This is a 501c. 501c3, I think, and this is a 501c4. One of them is a 501c4. The 501c4 is similar to like how I want to say a PAC works, like a super PAC where they can donate to the government, lobby firms, those types of things. That's what the 501c4 is designated for. And based on the federal tax laws, that is allowable under a 501c4. So if much of this is done on the decisions made by a board and the president of the board is assassinated, there's a high chance that this event change is going to cause a delay in the filing, because you have to have someone in place to make those decisions. So this will make sense once we go into the actual the recent tax filing for Turning Point endowment. And I'm speaking on that particularly because that is the one that he's saying that this money is going into. And somehow Candace Owens thinks it's missing.
Financial statement for the other organization is missing. We cannot see how this $8.6 million is being spent. This is very important because there are strange variances around this money. I have pulled the last 5 years of 990 forms for Turning Point USA. Here is a table with contributions compared with the largest expense, which are the grants from Schedule I. You can immediately see a strange dip between 2022 and 2023. This dip happens because in prior years, they were sending money to Turning Point Endowment. They were transferring millions of dollars. This stopped in 2021, and they started ramping up sending money to America's Turning Point. Let's break this down. First of all, I find it really unethical that they were sending millions of dollars to their own endowment.
No, it's not unethical. It's not illegal either. This is a Google search. Just looking up what an endowment is will solve a lot of this stuff. Because reading is fundamental. In all thy getting, the Bible says, get some understanding. God's not trying to tell you what to absorb. He just wants you to take some initiative and go out and research the information, Candace. This has nothing to do with anyone trying to shut you up. This is just simple information you can research and read on your own. If you don't know what an endowment is, look it up. It's not unethical for a nonprofit to send money to their own board designated or quasi endowment. It's not unethical. It's quite normal. And understanding what an endowment is, you would understand why funds then went to the other subsidiary. So this is just showing he did not give any background information on what an endowment is. He doesn't go over this at all. Not even a little bit. Not one definition of endowment up here.
I know that a lot of nonprofits do this, but I think it is unethical. Do the donor?
No one cares. Neither does the IRS, because it is allowable. It's ethical, actually, and it's legal. What would be unethical is if it were maybe a restricted endowment that is basically restrictions based upon the donors on how the organization spends the money, manages the money, and invests it. But that's not this type of endowment here that Turning Point has. Once again, he didn't give the definition or the various types of endowments that Turning Point has as options for them. Didn't speak on the restrictions, nothing. No background research on this. Just here's the tax, this is red flags, blah, blah, blah. I find it unethical. It's not unethical.
Donors know this is how Turning Point is spending their money. Turning Point USA is taking in donations and then sending the money to their endowment to invest in the stock market.
That's what
in my
happens.
opinion,
that's what it is. An endowment is going to use money, and having an endowment is no different than a 401k or an investment account. The fact that it's investing in the stock market would be no different than a 401k and the investment firm taking your money from your 401k, doing business with it, and investing it into stocks. That helps you to generate a return on your investment or to generate profits. Once again, had he looked up what an endowment is and named the various types, people would have more context, because Candy ass cult followers don't Google. Unbelievable.
They should be spending donations on operating their nonprofit, not on buying investments.
Nope. That's not how that works. The donations, if they put it into an endowment, that principle stays there. It is the ROI, the profits that is being spent back into the organization. He should have put up what an endowment is. Candace didn't even look it up.
The fiscal year 2023, they had $61 million of assets in the endowment, which was generating $1.9 million a year of investment income. Personally, I think
that investment income, let's go back. That investment income is what you use to put back into the organization to spend, not the core principle of the endowment. There are restrictions for that.
Not on buying investments. As of fiscal year 2023, they had $61 million of assets in the endowment, which was generating $1.9 million a year.
Yeah, this is the ROI here, the investment income. This is what they are allowed to spend and use, the 1.9 mil. The 61, the core amount, the principal amount, like a 401k, is supposed to sit there and help you to generate investment income or profit. That is the purposes of that endowment. It's long-term investment in vitality, ensuring that if you're making, good investments, you get an ROI, and then you spend that ROI while the principal still sits there. This is just a Google search, people.
Year of investment income. Personally, I think that's an unethical way to run a nonprofit, but that's just my opinion. But what is important here is what happened to the missing $8.6 million, the amount sent to America's Turning Point in fiscal year 2024. The amount of money sent to America's Turning Point was getting larger and larger, and because the financial statements are missing, we cannot tell how this money was spent. If we look at the prior year, the majority of the money was spent on other salaries and wages. How is this possible when America's Turning Point reports 0 employees? Does anyone else think that sounds a little suspicious? In my opinion, what I think is happening is I think there are fake people on the payroll. I think that paychecks are getting sent to people who do not really exist. And that would explain why we have a company with...
Based on what evidence? Based on what evidence? They have Charlie Kirk and 2 others listed on the tax forms. Based on what evidence do you believe that they have a ghost payroll? Based on what evidence? They're required to report reportable income for salaries. So what evidence do you have to show that they're actually generating a payroll for people that don't exist? And is it reportable income? It's just Google searches.
0 employees with millions of dollars of salary expense.
Yeah, that sounds highly suspicious to me, especially when you add in the fact that Charlie wanted to establish a Doge 7 days before he died, when you also add the fact that they're all telling strange lies, when you also add in the fact that there was this weird psychological campaign to tell us not to look at Turning Point USA, or we're going to go to hell, essentially. They're like using...
No one said that, girl. No one said that, girl. Because you could simply Google this stuff just like this content creator, this Wolves and Finance did. You could have Googled what is an endowment. You could have pulled the tax forms yourself. My question is, how much did you get when you sold Blexit to Turning Point USA? Because that was an expense for them. They probably considered that an investment. But how much did you earn from that sale? You can't make this stuff up.
A biblical passage to tell us why it's not moral. Do they think we are this soft and persuadable? Like, do we look like the kinds of people that are just going to watch an assassination in broad daylight and just let it go because some influencers insist that we do?
No. Influencers are insisting that you stop making false accusations. This is one of it. Why can't either of you post up what an endowment is, go through the various types, and explain the context of the information? And then you will see that an endowment is similar to an investment account. That is how it works. So if the money that goes into the endowment is then used to trade and to invest in stock markets, it's for the purposes of creating a profit. The principle is to remain untouched. That is the point of it. You don't want that amount to be too big because you can't spend the principal. You can only spend the actual profits generated from that. So that's exactly what you want that money to do, is to generate a profit. And then that profit is what you put back into Turning Point USA, the organization itself. So the other money that they have, they put into another 501c3. Once those 3 tax documents are filed, then you'll be able to see this stuff. He's making it seem as if they failed to do it. No. They had an event change where the CEO was shot and killed. We'll get to that in a minute.
Oh,
I don't want to get ahead of myself.
It's not 1963. You're not going to get away with it this time. Anyways, he then goes on to describe how they conducted their own audits using a firm called Baker Tilly. I'll let him take it away.
What about Tyler Boyer's argument that they have an annual financial audit every year? If what I'm saying is true, why wouldn't their annual audit catch these issues? The annual financial audit for Turning Point USA, Inc. and its...
Because they're not true. They simply haven't filed the other 3 tax forms for the subs. And they probably have requested another extension, which they are allowed to do because they had an event change. There is circumstances that is beyond their control that has occurred when they lost their CEO and the president of the board. So if you're saying something that's true, why hasn't the IRS audited them? Even better, right? Wouldn't you want the IRS to actually be the ones to audit? Because if something's going on with the IRS audit, guess what? The IRS has a way of making you pay. Mighty funny how the IRS has never done an audit. Because the problems that he's bringing up that doesn't exist when he's failed to even put up the definition of an endowment.
affiliates was performed by an accounting firm called Baker Tilly. In the notes, they explain that they audited Turning Point USA, Turning Point Action, Turning Point Endowment, America's Turning Point, and TP USA Merch. That usually means they audited all the shell companies when they provided their opinion that the statements present fairly in all material respects. That means it is a clean audit with no problems. I wonder if Baker Tilly will provide an explanation why they can issue a flawless audit report when 3 990 forms were never filed with the IRS. And just to clarify,
they have not been filed yet. Because they are entitled to another extension. They lost their CEO. I'll go over there in a minute. You just can't make this stuff up.
Baker Tilly's audit opinion letter is signed after Turning Point missed the filing date with the IRS. So there is no excuse for Baker Tilly not to mention this in their audit opinion. Erica Kirk assumed the role of CEO of Turning Point USA on September.
Because Baker Tilly is not the IRS. It is up to the IRS to give them another extension. It should not have any bearing on an audit being done. Does he not realize what he's saying? You could get an outside firm to do an audit, especially if you're a nonprofit. If you have not filed tax forms to the IRS, because what do you tell them? We're waiting on an extension. We're still preparing those documents. The audit itself is supposed to be based on the expenses of the companies. They don't need the actual tax forms to do the audit. They're supposed to be going into whatever financial system records that they have, looking at payroll reports, expense reports, those types of things. Baker Tilly is not the IRS. What is Baker Tilly going to do other than tell the IRS, hey, they have 3 subsidiaries where they have not filed the tax forms yet. So FYI. Oh, okay. Well, are you all Turning Point? No, we're Baker Tilly. Oh, okay. We'll work that out with them. You kidding?
November 18th, 2025, 8 days after Charlie Kirk was murdered. She has been the CEO for almost 2 months. She needs to answer these questions. If
she needs to grieve her deceased husband, What do you think she's doing? There's a reason why this secession had to occur too. When you have a, no, I'll get to it. Good grief.
Someone has lied on the 990 form. People go to jail for that. I want some explanation of why Turning Point USA sent $8.6 million to their shell company and then did not file financial statements. And Erica, I don't know who does the accounting at Turning Point, but if they have not been telling you about any of this, you need to fire your accountants immediately.
I think all valid points. And again, just to modify, it is possible that when they used that outside auditor, that they showed them all of the documentation and then they gave them a clean bill of health. And then for whatever reason, Turning Point decided not to file. It's possible. Okay. Like I said, probably low probability, but it is plausible that they did that. But it is just a fact that they missed the filing extension deadline. So what's going on here?
One extension deadline here. Are you confused, Candace? Are you just not going to look up, if a nonprofit organization can request a second extension? Are you stopping short of the short yellow bus here? Are you really not going to research this information? Is this how this is going to go?
Where did the 8.5 million go? And what's also compelling about this video, which we didn't show, is that he clarifies that Turning Point USA actually decreased their staff, the 501c3 arm, 33% by 33%. There was a 33% staff reduction. And yet the cost of salaries somehow went up. And to him, that looks suspicious. And I agree, that looks suspicious, right? And this, of course, is the kind of pressure that needs to be put on them. Yes, I said it was a very bad idea right off the bat for Erica, who's grieving her husband, to then instantly become a chairman and the CEO, because these are valid questions now that people are asking. And a chairman and a CEO.
No, it's not. All right, let's get to it. I'm going to go tab by tab, just based on basic research and Google, so that you guys can see why it wasn't a bad idea. All right, we'll get to it. So first question was, is it illegal to transfer money to an endowment? Transferring money to an endowment is generally not illegal for a nonprofit. However, it is subject to legal restrictions and regulations. Endowments are governed by the Uniform Prudent Management of Institutional Funds Act, acronymed as UPMIFA, which governs endowment spending and modifications as well as investments. So that money being invested into the stock market, yes, that's normal. That is absolutely normal. That happens. God. Nonprofits must ensure that they are using endowment funds properly and that any modifications to restrictions are done according to the donor's intent or legal requirements. So, next question I asked, because I'm taking you tab by tab here. Is Turning Point required to maintain an endowment? Turning Point USA, TPUSA, is not explicitly required to maintain an endowment in its tax filings. However, it is not explicitly required to maintain an endowment in its tax filings. Because we're all reading the same thing here. And Candace, I told you, you're bad at this, girl. Just simple things like this. You can just do a quick Google search before your show starts, because it's already scripted. And then have them tell you in your microphone in your ear, hey, make sure you go over endowment because Lady Luck Club gonna chew you out. You could have just went over this. This is unnecessary. So since they're not explicitly required to maintain an endowment in its tax filings, however, the organization has been associated with entities like Turning Point Endowment, which is a supporting organization under TPUSA. It's a subsidiary. So you have the parent company, Turning Point USA, and then you have the three babies that fall underneath it. Turning Point Endowment being one of them. This suggests that while Turning Point USA itself does not have to maintain an endowment, it may support and benefit the endowment through contributions and investments to ensure its long-term vitality. You guys have seen it for yourself. He's talking about something being unethical that is considered to be a normal practice here. It may support and benefit the endowment. TPUSA, the parent company, can send money to the endowment through contributions and investments to ensure its long-term vitality. Let's go to the next one. And then I asked, Turning Point USA has a Turning Point endowment, because I said, what type of endowment does Turning Point USA have? So they have a Turning Point endowment which serves as its financial and long-term arm. This endowment is designated to support and benefit the organization's charitable purposes and long-term vitality. It operates within TPUSA institutional structure and is involved in making grants to programmatic affiliates. Okay, so let's go over to the tax form. And I just pulled up 1 year, but I want you all to see here. See here. This is a table, the endowment funds. This is part 5 of Form 990 Schedule D. So if you see here, this drop option, Schedule D is where it speaks on endowment funds. So I want to go up first right quick. I just want to make sure I didn't miss the information on the type of endowment that this is. Okay. So if you all see here, the endowment fund held by the filing organization in support of Turning Point USA. Amounts are appropriated from this board designated endowment. That is, there are 3 types of endowments. One speaks to a quasi endowment. This is typically a board designated endowment to support the program activities of Turning Point USA. So let's scroll back up to the table we were looking at. This is still Schedule D. You guys see fixed income securities. These are investments. Common stock, limited partnerships. These investments are allowable with an endowment. It is not illegal and it's not unethical. As long as the restrictions are being upheld, the endowment is being managed according to some policy in place, the spending or withdrawal of the money is being done, they have to have some policy in place for that, then it is not unethical. It will not be unethical until there is an excess of withdrawals or a lack of management, or the principal money, the principal amount is being used against the intent and purposes based on the type of endowment that it is. So we'll go over that right quick after we check out this information up here. So if you look right here at number 2, provide the estimated percentage of the current year end balance, line 1G, column A, held as A, board designated or quasi endowment, 100%. Keep this in mind, quasi endowment. We're going to go over the information of what an endowment is and the 3 types of endowments that a nonprofit organization is legally allowed to have, and we'll go over the extensions in a second. So you guys can see here the beginning balance, this table up here. They have current year, prior year, 2 years back, 3 years back, 4 years back. So you kind of working your way backwards here. So they're starting with current year based on what year this tax form is filed. So you have a beginning of year balance at 50 grand, contribution $77,000, net investment, earnings, gains, and losses, 5.465 million. This is the endowment, Schedule D, the endowment tax filing here. So it speaks just to Turning Point endowment. You have 458,000 regarding other expenditures for facilities and programs, administrative expenses, 138,000, and then of course end of year balance where you get total 55 million, 55.5 million. So as you all can see, going 4 years back up into 3, 2 prior and current, the amounts go up. You also see contributions that start off at 6.9, and then you have these expenses that kind of eat down some of the costs. Then you have 15 mil, 18 mil, 11 mil, and then 77,000. Mind you, 2024, tax year 2024, for the endowment, the 3 baby companies have not been submitted yet. It does not mean that they failed to do it. Okay? So this is that table he was showing. I don't know why he didn't show the whole thing. It's no reason to sit here and not just post the whole table up and let people see exactly what you're referring to here. So if you want to do the math for that 8.5 mil, this would be the best place to start. Utilizing the actual endowment worksheet for the tax forms itself. And yes, it does give you other expenses. You got land, buildings, and equipment here. You got your actual investments, meaning they're investing in the stock market, because that's what this type of account allows the nonprofit to do. It's like a big ass investment account. Then you have the total here, 18.7 mil. Because the goal is the more money you have to invest, the bigger the ROI. So as opposed to the money sitting on the books just for the parent company, they have to consider, how can we have more longevity when it comes to generating revenue? Because you can't just rely on donors, forever. You got to find a way to have your money make money for itself. The best way to do that, invest it. So while you don't touch the core principal amount, if it's $5 million, you don't touch the 5 mil. Whatever is being generated as an ROI, that's what you're spending. Just like we showed in the video. So you guys can check out the tax forms. I'm gonna be honest, it's a whole lot. It's several pages long. But I would start with this table. And do the math. And I can guarantee you that 8 mil is gonna come up. It's not like it's lost forever in space. It's reported. You just want to see how it's broken down. So once they file the taxes, those 3 baby company tax statements, then you'll be able to see that. But they're making it seem like they're just choosing not to do it. And I'm just scrolling through so you all can see. You all can see all this information here. And I encourage you all to look this stuff up. So Turning Point USA is a 501c3. Turning Point Action is a 501c4. So a 501c4 is almost similar to a super PAC, where you can invest in lobbying and political interests and those types of things under this 501c4 here. So they would have to have that separately if they wanted to do that. And then, of course, America's Turning Point is another 501c3. That's what he was talking about, where money stopped going to the endowment and then started going into America's Turning Point. It could have been the earnings or the ROI generated from the endowment that then they use to put over into America's Turning Point, so that they can utilize the ROI or those profits to actually spend to the organization, while the core principal is still sitting at the endowment. So let's get to some basic fundamentals here. The pros and cons of creating an endowment for a nonprofit. I just Googled this information. This is from CFOselections.com. And there are other resources that will help you guys understand what an endowment is. And if you have a nonprofit or, small business owner, give you some tips on which would be more recommendable based on the size of the company. All right. So every so often, one of our nonprofit clients will see a small windfall in unrestricted funds, such as a large gift or a bequest, proceeds on the sale of an asset or loan forgiveness, wanting to protect funding for mission-driven programs into the future. Some will start discussing the possibility of setting up an endowment. So what is an endowment, and are they always the best thing to do? For this article, we are focusing on endowments set up by for or by an organization, excluding endowment funds held in donor-advised funds. So it's a totally different fund account. On the most basic level, an endowment is money, and I'm going to highlight this, set aside and invested, because they're investing in the stock market, and that is not an unethical thing to do. It is very ethical. It is legal. So I don't know who that guy was, but once again, he could have just Googled an endowment. Candace could have done that. Candace, you're bad at this, girl. Why didn't you just Google an endowment? That's okay. I'll do it for you. So because I know Candy ass is gonna come over here and say, "Oh, you're just trying to get $7,000 from the Israeli prime minister." You can't make this stuff up. On the most basic level, an endowment is money set aside and invested to earn revenue to fund charitable activity. So you have to invest it because that's how it goes. Period. Can't make this up. The endowment's principal value, the principal money or corpus, is usually kept intact, meaning you're not touching it. So if it's 50 million sitting there, it should sit there. That's it. So at the same time, investment earnings, meaning your ROI, investment earnings. Remember that part of the video he showed where it was like 1.9? And I say that is the money that they are allowed to use and put back into Turning Point USA to spend towards expenses. Your investment earnings can be granted or transferred to fund an organization's operations or programs, in theory, into perpetuity. Donating to an endowment may appeal to donors because they are tax deductible. There you go. Upon donating. However, funds may not directly benefit the organization until earnings are generated for the designated purpose. So the goal is to treat it like an investment account. Let's put this money aside in this 401k. And then Charles Schwab is going to go ahead and take that money and, do some investments with the stock market. You can buy stocks yourself to increase your ROI. And then the interest that you earn from that, whatever that investment income is, then maybe you can use that, depending on the type of plane you have, to help go out of town on a trip, take your kids to Disney World for Florida for Christmas. Yeah, so I would love to do that. I would love to take my kids to Disney World for Christmas. It'd just be beautiful. Okay. They could also see their gift as having more reach, generating more extended gains for an organization. Institutions and individuals can also donate cash and non-cash assets such as stock to the endowment. So Turning Point can even be gifted stock. The idea that they're investing in the stock market is very ethical and very legal. Once again, I don't know where she got that guy from, but it's a disservice to say you feel it's unethical and there's no facts to even show how it's unethical. Because that's what it comes down to. And to just say something like that with no context at all, no factual basis or premise at all, it's like an insult when you can research this information. So yes, it is okay for them to invest in the stock market. That is what this money is primarily for goodness sake. An endowment can be structured as a trust, private fund, foundation, or charitable organization. Okay, keep that in mind because Turning Point Endowment is a 501c3. Okay, within this, there are restricted endowments with the principal held in perpetuity, while investment earnings are granted per the donor's recommendation. So that's one type of endowment, restricted endowment. Term endowments may allow for the disbursement of the principal, but only after a specified period or particular event. So that's a second type of endowment. The third type is the unrestricted endowments that consist of assets that can be spent, saved, invested, like in the stock market. It can be invested in the stock market and distributed at the discretion of the institution receiving the gift. Look at God. Reading is fundamental, Candace. I encourage you to do a little bit of it. To the candy asses, I know you guys aren't going to read. It's whatever. You can't make this up. All right, so as you can see here, unrestricted endowments, once again, consist of assets that can be spent, saved, invested, like in the stock market, and distributed at the discretion of the institution receiving the gift. So it will be at the discretion of Turning Point USA. Does that make sense? Typically, you will still see the principal held with earnings distributed per policy. So as long as the principal amount, let's say it's the $5 million. I'm just throwing a number out there. It's $5 million. That $5 million should not be touched. It should sit there. Let that $5 million make you more money. And the best way to do it is through those investments where you can generate that profit or the ROI, and you use the return on investment money to then put back into your organization to use for expenses. Whatever expenses you need it for, that's what you do it with. So we have recently seen some clients talking about quasi endowments. Now, you all recall this. And share this tab again. Let's go back up, because this is getting juicy. It's getting good, people, because it's starting to come together. Okay. Now, you all remember this. This is on the tax form here, Form 990, Schedule D, Part 5, Endowment Funds. You all see this here again? Board designated or quasi endowment. Here we go. Just want to make sure everybody can see that. So let's go back to the information. Quasi endowment, also known as board designated endowments. Look at God. Ain't God good? Just a little bit of research can get you a long way, Candace. Just a little bit. Just a Google search and reading. Why are you getting your information from someone that says, personally, I think it's unethical? Personally, no one gives a damn. I mean, what are you talking about? You're going against fundamental facts here. That's exactly what that money is for, to invest in stock markets. To invest. However you want to generate a profit off of it. So that you can just spend the profit and leave the principal there. Leave it alone. So quasi endowments, also known as board designated endowments, the nonprofit organization funds, quasi endowment funds. So that nonprofit, Turning Point USA, funds the Turning Point endowment. Does that make sense? Turning Point, being the nonprofit, funds this quasi endowment fund known as Turning Point endowments. So to send money to the endowment is exactly what happens with a quasi endowment. That's why I keep saying that is very legal and very ethical. For someone to say it is unethical and they don't show you with facts and documentation why it's unethical is very reckless and stupid. Especially when I can just do a Google search and look at this stuff myself. That content creator, whatever his name is, was it Wolves and Finance or something? What was his name? I don't know. Hold on. Whoever this guy is. Wolves and Finance. So at Wolves and Finance, why didn't you just pull this information up and go over it? Or at least show that you have a fundamental understanding of an endowment. I'm going to tag him in this damn video, because I mean that. That was just a ball of ignorance. No one thought to research this information on Candace Owens' team. Yeah, okay. Candace, you're a clown. So the Turning Point USA organization funded their own endowment because it is a quasi endowment or a board designated endowment. And their principles may be used or granted at the board's discretion. Now, here's where Erica Kirk comes into play. Because Candace Owens does not understand complex concepts and terms. The reason why they wanted to go ahead and appoint someone is because, one, I'm sure Charlie Kirk had it in his will to appoint Erica Kirk as CEO, and there she shall remain. and you will not be CEO, Candace, and you're going to have to get over it. Then you will not be Turning Point CEO. So with Charlie Kirk having been the president of the board, now you need someone to fill that space to help make those decisions again. She would have to sign off on documents, ensure that the tax filings are done, all these things that just so happen to be happening around the time her extension for the tax filings were due. I don't think it was a matter of, oh, they just didn't want to turn it in. They were dealing with the loss of their CEO. She's dealing with the loss of her husband and the father of her children. Wills in finance, you better grow a soul and a conscience. Don't be like Candace Owens. Because I'm right here pulling up facts and documentation on your ass all day, every day. Reading is fundamental. So as long as it's at the board's discretion, and now you have a new CEO, which means that she is also the president of the board. She's going to have to make the decisions on this. So give her some time to get acclimated to it and some time to actually get an extension done. They have tax attorneys, they have firms, they have people that can do this stuff for them, but they can't do much of anything without the board's permission. And that is how it's supposed to work. That is how you create checks and balances. I don't think that there was something going on that's unusual that Charlie Kirk was not aware of, especially after reading what the hell an endowment is in the first place, and the fact that they're not required to maintain an endowment on his tax filings. And that's based on information that I just researched. So now that we all know what an endowment is, the various types of an endowment, and of course, we verified that Turning Point USA is a board designated or quasi endowment. Now, Erica Kirk is going to have to make these decisions because she's now president of the board. Give her some time to do that. All right. Again, the intent remains largely that the principal would be held and earnings used to support programs into perpetuity. Typically, most endowments are governed by an investment policy, a withdrawal policy, and a usage policy. These outline types of investments allowed and investment manager restrictions. In meeting return targets, establish the amount an organization can take out from the fund each determined period. So you can only take out so much each determinate period. You can't just go tomorrow and then the day after and then, back to back trying to pull money out. No. So it needs to have those level of restrictions in place and have some policies in place that outline how this money is invested, withdrawn, and used. So maybe they have a maximum dollar amount set based on their investment policy, which is why they started putting money over into the other two sectors, because they didn't want to go over whatever the maximum is. They may have a maximum cap. Who knows? And I'll let you guys go through the tax forms and you can see if there was a maximum cap. But if there are, then it would make sense for them to say, okay, now let's put money into the other subsidiary and make use of that. But you don't want too much into the board designated endowment because you can't touch the core principal amount of money. So if they put in $50 million again tomorrow, you're talking about over $100 million. They won't be able to touch that. And then you don't want to, risk too much when it comes to investing in the stock market, because you never know what's going to happen, right? So you got to keep it reasonable. And it's probably why it would be wise and best to have a maximum cap as far as how much money should go into the endowment account. And I think they've pretty much figured that out, considering they didn't do it every year. They just kind of did it for the first 3 years, and then they put the money in another sub. And it makes sense. And it's not illegal. And it's not a matter of ethics. It's just not. This is common. So establish the amount an organization can take out from the fund each determined period, and identify the endowment's purpose and ensure the use is adhering to its purpose, respectively. Except in a few circumstances, the terms of endowments cannot be violated. There you go. Who has endowments and what are they good for? One would think when one thinks of an endowment, an educational institution such as a university comes to mind. This is not surprising, as universities hold nearly $600 billion in assets in endowments. Churches, hospitals, community foundations, and nonprofit organizations, which is Turning Point USA, can also have endowments. Some organizations, such as nonprofit cemeteries, may be required by states to maintain an endowment. We already looked, and Turning Point is not required. Here it is. They're not required to maintain an endowment. So the endowment type that they have, being that quasi or designated board designated endowment, is all that they need. It's good enough. So they have some pros and cons here, of course. Like always, make sure you're getting the advice that you need, because this is treated like an investment account, and it should be. I mean, how else do you expect money to continue to flow if you're not willing to do some investments? We see how much money is coming in, but now you got to figure out a way to keep this money, functioning and generating for you. And that's the best way to do it. Let's start investing. They have some other information here. When is an endowment a bad idea? How to get out of it? For an organization that figured this out a bit too late, how does one get out of an endowment? So it goes over that information. And you guys can check the description of the video for the link to this article that will be there for you all to read. And now let's get to the last topic here. Okay. Because, saying that they failed to do something is just absurd. I brought this up in the live earlier because I wanted to make sure I did this the right way. As you all can see, I had a, ton of information to present. And so now we're here where the nonprofit organizations, this is for, filing extensions. Okay. Nonprofit organizations can request a second extension to file taxes by applying for an additional 3-month extension using Form 8868. And see, this was what I was saying when I was reacting to Candace earlier. How do you know they have not notified the IRS and asked for an additional extension? And I think a couple people in the chat said they couldn't, that's not possible. You can't do that. Well, did you Google it? Did you research this stuff? I have no reason to trust anything anyone says if I know that I'm not sure on it, and I would rather get the facts on here than to read a comment. But it goes to show how the candy asses don't read. They don't like to research and read stuff. This is just a Google search. So they would have to fill out the Form 8868 for an additional 3-month extension. This extension is not automatic, because automatic ones, you have to fill out a form when your taxes are due. I think you fill out the form and you can get, I think, 6 months. This extension is not automatic and requires the organization to provide a valid reason for needing the additional time. This is what I was trying to say in the live stream that I did, covering this video with Candace. And I said, I want to make sure I just get the information. So I'll do a separate video, something to that extent, because I didn't want to try to, give wrong information. Candy asses are already good for them, but we don't do that over here. I have to have facts and evidence. So this is it. Simple Google search. It says here, the IRS allows a total of two. Oh, no, I can't click it. Hold on. Okay, they have to provide a valid reason for needing additional time. Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. That is a valid justification. It's a valid reason to get a 3-month extension. Yeah. So instead of that person saying they refused to do it, how do you know they did not request a second extension? Nonprofit organizations can request a second extension to file taxes by applying for an additional 3-month extension using Form 8868. So why are they saying that they just, have not done it, and people need to see that? What makes you think that they have not notified the IRS and asked for an extension again with a valid reason? Valid mean Charlie Kirk was shot and killed in front of everybody. That's a valid reason. So I believe that it would be nothing for them to get an additional 3-month extension. It wouldn't be hard at all. And you have to provide the valid reason for needing the additional time. The IRS allows a total of 2 extensions per tax returns. 4 tax returns. I'm sorry. 2 extensions for tax returns. But the second extension must be requested after the first extension has been granted. Nonprofits should file Form 8868 by the original due date of their tax return to receive the automatic extension. This is the automatic extension. If the organization has already been granted the automatic extension, it can request the non-automatic extension by providing documentation supporting the reason for needing additional time. Someone passing away is more than enough of a reason to get additional time. So, I just want to make sure hold on. I want to make sure I didn't skip anything here. Let's see. Okay, so I just want to go over this information right quick. I want to make sure I have the right one because you can go on the IRS website. It's fine, to do that. So they have the forms and everything there. You guys can look at it and see what each form is for. So I can share that right quick. The extension of time to file exempt organization returns. This is the Form 8868 that you will have to file by the original due date your taxes are due. And then you would get a 6-month automatic extension to of time to file any of the following returns. Of course, these are the terms, the returns that you have to file here, Form 990, and then just variations of that. And an organization will only be allowed an extension of 6 months for a return tax year, for a tax year. Note that the Form 8868 cannot be filed to extend the due date of a Form 990N. And of course, let's go back over to some good information here. Form 990, return of organization exempt from income tax. This form is used by charities and nonprofits to report activities to the IRS each year. Form 990 has 12 pages and 12 parts and requires the organization to provide details about donations, management, and pay structure. You must file Form 990 for a tax-exempt organization if either of the following apply. The organization's gross receipts are $200,000 or more for the year, or the organization's total assets are $500,000 or more for the total year. So, like I said, I don't think that they're just dodging this. I think they just needed an extension because Charlie Kirk was shot and assassinated. That's pretty much what it comes down to. So, I'm just trying to make sure. Let's see. If you run a tax exempt organization, whether you're a director, manager, administrator, you may want to look at requesting a federal tax extension um, using Form 8868. So you can an automatic 3-month tax extension, 6 months for corporate filings, Form 990T, an additional, not automatic, 3-month tax extension. To request the automatic 3-month extension, only fill out Part 1 of Form 8868. By the deadline, you will be granted the automatic extension. To apply for the additional, the not automatic 3-month extension, only fill out Part 2 of the Form 8868. Note that you cannot apply for both the automatic and additional tax extensions at the same time. Doesn't mean you can't do it, just can't do it at the same time. So, as you go over Form 8868, you'll notice that the IRS requires you to provide a reason for needing the tax extension. I do believe that someone being, assassinated is more than enough reason. So, all they would have to do is maybe show, I don't know, whatever little information they would need. It shouldn't be a whole lot, but just something to show, hey, lost a spouse, the company is grieving, and all these other things. And they don't send it all. And I'm sure they'll get an extension. It wouldn't be hard. But they do have the option to get a second extension. Not just one, but 2. They just have to, state the reason for needing the tax extension now, because they've already exhausted the automatic 6 months. So, also remember, and then business extension, Form 7004. Okay, the requirement is different than the rules for requesting a personal extension, Form 4868, or a business extension, Form 7004. Okay, so yeah, this is some information here you guys can check out and read. I'm trying to make sure I got everything up here. I didn't skip over anything because I want you all to be thoroughly to be thoroughly vetted in this information. Candace, you're gonna get that hotline tip, honey. It's just gonna explode. Lord. Oh, child. You can't make this stuff up. It was a Google search. That's all she had to do was Google. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything here. The IRS allows 2 extensions. It says the IRS allows a total of 2 extensions for tax returns, but the second extension must be requested after the first was granted. Okay. So that's that. So it's safe to assume that they're, getting an extension, and they'll be filing by the next due date of the extension before it runs out. But to say that they have not done anything, no, that's not correct. And it's the last thing Erica needs, right? It's all these insinuations on something where people aren't reading basic information. It's ridiculous. So, the young man that she played in the video, he could have done a little research on this stuff. Kind of gave the basis or the premise for what an endowment is, and then let went through the types of endowments you can have, and give us some basic information, and that's it. So, thank you all so much for tuning in. We're hitting an hour. All of my resources will be in the description of the video, so make sure you guys tune in for that. So more than likely they're getting an extension. They did have some extenuating circumstance, and once they're up and available, I'm sure people are going to go want to see them, and you might just be disappointed because it's going to be done right. All right, y'all. That's all I have. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will be going live tomorrow. We're gonna try to get in another Candace. If not, we're definitely doing an Umar tomorrow, and I'm kind of behind on him. So you guys make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the LLC and show your love. Leave your comments and thoughts below. I don't think that they did anything intentional, but some of you may disagree. So leave your comments below and we will chop it up tomorrow. So until the next one, Lady Luck Club out. Deuces.